So in order to understand how we feel pain, we will have a look on the nervous system, and more specifically the sensory nerves and pain receptors. So the nervous system has two main components, the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. We have nerve roots which branch off from the spine, and this extends into the peripheral nerves which cover the whole body. In the central nervous system, these nerve roots, they enter the spinal cord, and the spinal cord take it to the brain. So there you go, here's the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. Within each nerve, we have thousands of nerve fibers. So here's the anatomy of a peripheral nerve. We have bundles of nerve cells or nerve fibers, which is composed of many single fibers. So it's not just one thing, it's many fibers inside the nerve, and the blood vessels which supply nutrients to the nerve. Each of these fibers is a single cell, which is called a neuron. So here's the neuron, and it can be a bit confusing sometimes, but the neuron, nerve cell, nerve fiber, we are all talking about the same thing. It's this guy that we're talking about. Each neuron have a cell body and a very thin and long fiber, which can also be called the axon. Within the peripheral nervous system, there are sensory nerves. Sensory nerves send information from the environment to the brain. They are responsible for sensations such as pain. The cell body of sensory neurons is located in the nerve roots, just next to the spinal cord. Here's the cell body in the nerve roots, and the nerve fiber enters the spinal cord, connects the spinal cord to the whole nerve. Here we have the fiber starts in the spinal cord, and it starts in here in the spinal cord and extends down the whole nerve. So this is all one single cell. Each of those fibers is one single cell that has all this length. This is the longest cell in the human body. And each of those fibers terminates in a receptor. So many sensory fibers terminate near the skin. So we have branching of these structures, which are individual sensory fibers, and they are sensitive to things like touch, pressure, stretch, temperature, vibration, and pain. The pain receptors, these guys here, they can also be referred as nociceptors, and the activation of these receptors triggers the sensation of pain. Of course, it takes it to the nervous system, so there will be other things that will modulate pain, including things like stress or anticipation, but this is where pain starts. It's triggered by the nociceptors. So there are different modalities of nociceptors which will sense different types of harm. So for example, we have mechanical nociceptors which sense intense pressure, stretching, and cutting. And I put here, just for curiosity, paper cut. Why paper cut is so painful? It's because the paper cut is not deep enough for the body to clot properly, but they're deep enough to activate nociceptors, so that's why they hurt. We have thermal nociceptors which will feel extreme cold and heat. I put peppers here because peppers contain a molecule that activates heat receptors, and that's why they taste hot. The temperature is just ambient temperature, but you will bite into it and you will feel warm because of that. Then we also have chemical nociceptors, which will be activated by irritant substances such as acids, solvents, and endogenous molecules associated with harm. Endogenous molecules, for example, they will sense lactic acid, which accumulates in the body after an intensive workout, and also things like molecules involved in inflammatory cascades. And in onions, we have gaseous substances that activate these nociceptors in the eye, so that's why they make you cry. Nociceptors are high threshold receptors, which means they do not activate easily. They will not be sensitive to very light pressure, so a gentle touch will not activate these receptors, which is exactly what we want to, because type of stimuli is not harmful. We should not trigger any pain. A stimuli that is intense enough, for example, we saw in the beginning, stepping into a nail, we have this high pressure in the skin, and then the mechanoreceptors will activate. So once the receptor is activated, the fiber conducts nerve impulses which travels up the nervous system and trigger the sensation of pain in the brain. And in fact, it might even trigger responses before it arrives in the brain. So reflex responses are generated in the spinal cord actually, so that's why they happen unconsciously. Before it arrives in the brain and triggers the experience of pain, you might have already retracted your foot because of this reflex response.